All right, we're talking about dynamics today. Hey, I'm Isaac Schanno Johnson. If you don't know me, I'm a musician, composer, producer, and I make videos about all that fun stuff, music composition, music production. So make sure you hit that subscribe button to see videos like this in the future. Exaggerate dynamics. Basically, when you're practicing dynamics, one thing that I tell my students to do all the time, and I do myself when I'm practicing a piece that has a wide dynamic range, is that I try to exaggerate them as much as I can. So every time I see piano, I try and play it pianissimo or triple piano. Every time I see forte, I try and play it fortissimo, triple forte, quadruple forte. I try and play it as loud as I can. I try and expand that range as much as I can when I'm playing. And I think one thing that this does when you're doing this is you want to really push the dynamic range. Push yourself to play in a bigger dynamic range. You want to expand your dynamic range as much as you can as you're practicing this, right? How quietly can you play? Play the pianos as quietly as you possibly can. Then every time you have forte, play them as loudly as you possibly can, right? As long as you aren't disturbing your neighbors, right? Play them as loud as you can and as quiet as you can. Expand them as much as you can. And then when you have something like mezzo forte or mezzo piano, bring it back a little bit. So those are slightly less quiet, right? And slightly less loud, so that you're really making this really big dynamic range. Because sometimes I think if you're playing a piece of music, you sort of get stuck in playing just mezzo, right? You're kind of just playing one dynamic level the entire time. It's not mezzo forte, it's not mezzo piano, it's just straight in the middle. Mezzo isn't a real dynamic for those people that aren't familiar. Mezzo's not real. You're kind of just playing in the middle, and you don't really have much of a dynamic range because you're not focusing on it as you play. In addition to that, something that I hear commonly is two dynamic ranges, mezzo forte and mezzo piano. You either have kind of loud and kind of quiet, and you're not really playing in a wide expressive dynamic range. Even if it has, double forte, fortissimo, and pianissimo, you're not playing those dynamics. Some people kind of just play in the middle, and all of it sort of becomes dulled. And I think that happens for a number of reasons. I think the main reason that happens is because dynamics aren't something you think about a whole lot unless you focus on them. You think about your technique and how the notes how clean the notes sound together, right? You think about the techniques you're using when you're playing, right? You think about using the right articulations, but dynamics, I think, are sometimes something that ends up being a little bit forgotten when you're practicing, where you don't really practice dynamics. You don't practice playing loud and playing quietly, but it's something that is incredibly useful when you're playing a piece of music, because you want the quiet parts to sound quiet and you want the loud parts to sound loud. And when you're playing that in a piece of music, you want that skill to be available to you. You want to be able to play a certain loudness, right? Even if that's louder than you're able to play right now, when you play that piece, you want that to be available to you. So practice it ahead of time so that you can get that loud and you can get that quiet while still retaining all of the other articulations and all of the other techniques that are involved in that piece of music. I also think when you sort of expand your dynamic range this way, and you imagine all the fortes are quadruple forte, all the pianos are quadruple piano, and you're trying to play as loud and as quiet as you can, as you physically can, right? I think what that means is you're able to play much larger of a dynamic range, so that when you play the piece in a performance, you can dial it back. And when you need to get that loud or get that quiet, that's available to you. You're able to go there, and you're able to sort of pull back on it, and you're able to control just how loudly and how quietly you're playing. And that's sort of the goal, is you want to have sort of a deeper control over how loud and quiet you can play. You want to have this deeper sort of knowledge and understanding and skill of just how loud and intensely you're playing. All right, that gets to the second thing that we can talk about, is intensity. When you're practicing dynamics, don't just think about them as volume, because volume is very different than dynamics. Volume is a knob, right? Volume is the thing that you control on your electric piano or on your guitar or on your mixing board or something, right? Volume is how loud something is. So it's different than dynamics. Dynamics, I think of them as intensity. If you're playing really intensely, you're playing forte. If you're playing really quietly, not intensely, you're sort of just lightly touching the keys, you're playing piano. And remember that to exaggerate those, maybe getting to triple forte isn't about louder, it's about more intense. Maybe getting to triple piano isn't about getting quieter, it's about getting less intense. You're taking away intensity. So as you're practicing this, add intensity and take away intensity to get to those different dynamic levels. That way, you're not just thinking about smashing your instrument as much as you can, and you're not thinking about just touching it as lightly as you can. You're thinking about playing music sort of in an expressive way, right? You're playing intensely and you're taking away intensity. That way, that allows you to get a wider dynamic range and a more varied dynamic range, because then you can sort of think volume plus intensity, right? You're not just thinking loud versus soft. I think that helps to sort of give another like perspective, another way of sort of adding extra layers of expressiveness and musicality to your music. All right, that's it for this video. I hope you found it useful. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something about music. If you did, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, and as always, thank you for watching, and I will see you next time. Peace.